Hello, welcome to the Attractions Group podcast. In today's episode, David and I are going to talk about the opening of Disneyland Abu Dhabi, and then, of course, have a great interview with David Kamen from the downtown Sandusky Cedar Point Historical Museum. Welcome to the Attractions Group podcast.
Welcome, Clete.
Hello.
How's it going?
Oh,
it's going great.
great.
Now, I think I'm going to climb into the head of people that were looking at the initial introduction, just seeing you up there, because I've given myself the byline underneath my name of the not as good host this week. And people that are viewing that are like, oh, thank God, goodness, that guy's not, the second guy's not there. Maybe he got replaced. Maybe he got hit by a car and he's in the hospital. But Anyway, it's great to be outside of the hospital. And how are you doing?
I will say, I will not let you slander yourself. I'm not going to let that happen. To all of our listeners, so far, we would have 0 interviews if it were not for David here. 0. So the show is made by our wonderful guests, of course, not by either of us. Mm-hmm. And, those are all consequences of David. So don't listen to that crazy digression.
So what's going on in Orlando today?
Well, so I'm in Ohio right now, just for
of course
a few days here. But or in Orlando today, I'm sure there are probably the beginnings of the non-pass holder preview days at Epic Universe that everyone was so up in arms about. Which I don't know if I've mentioned this on the show yet, but wow. What do you have to be mad about? I don't know. But what's going on in Cincinnati today?
Cincinnati, the Reds are coming back to start a homestand after a very bad road trip. I don't know how they go from scoring 10 runs in the first inning to being blanked the next game. I don't understand that at all. But that's I guess that's the axiom of the Cincinnati professional sports fans. It's hot or cold, hit or miss. Yeah. But other than that, it's just a beautiful spring day. We've had some great weather in the past couple of weeks, and looking forward to getting summer things going.
Cool. Okay, so last week we uploaded twice because we were like,
yes,
wow, Six Flags America got announced right after we made our video, so let's make a separate video about Six Flags America, and then we did that.
Exactly.
We do our normal episode, and then as soon as we submit that, Wednesday, that Thursday morning,
here comes a pitch, swing and a miss again.
Disneyland Abu Dhabi. Holy cow. I think that all the theme park chains, all the companies, they got together and they said, hey, we heard about this new podcast. It's called The Attractions Group. We don't want them to be able to post about news when it's fresh. So we're going to, as soon as they upload, that's when we'll announce stuff. I think that had to happen.
That has to be what happens, but to be honest, if we had that kind of power over time and space, we wouldn't be doing this. If it took that kind of trollery to get our name out there, I'm all for it. But I doubt if that's what happened. But we'll take it if it is. So yes. I guess maybe we should just take a poll. What news is going to break Thursday, the day after we upload?
Yes.
What's the next? What is SeaWorld going to come out with?
Yeah, there it is. Probably something. Maybe. Well, they did. I must say. I wasn't going to mention. I forgot about this, but Busch Gardens Tampa posted a pass holder, and we'll get into, of course, Disneyland Abu Dhabi in a moment. But I do need to say this. Busch Gardens Tampa posted a poll to their fans on the pass holder page, where they were like, "Here's some potential new coasters we might build," and one of them was a Giga. In Tampa, at Busch Gardens Tampa, a Giga coaster, which would be so cool. I mean, holy cow. I would not be. And also, the state of Florida has pretty much one of every model of B&M. pretty. I mean, there's a dive
Hmm.
coaster, there's an invert, there's a floorless, there's a launched coaster, there's a flying coaster, there's everything you want, but there's no Giga. So I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
So now that's the ones that are over 300 feet, right?
Right. So we're talking about like Orion, Fury 325,
Right.
and then
Okay.
Busch Gardens Tampa Mystery Giga.
Nice.
I
And that is that 2026 or is that 27?
I would imagine it would be a 27 because it's just now in the polling. Are we even going to do this? Because there were other rides
Hmm.
on there too, but I'm sure the fans would overwhelmingly vote for the Giga Coaster. But I don't know. Maybe not. I can be wrong.
All right. So for the news that we missed last week,
Yes.
Disneyland Abu Dhabi.
Wow. Okay.
Y-
So yes. Whoa. For those of you who don't know, which is all none of you don't know this, but there's this company called Miral who operates this island called Yass Island in kind of Abu Dhabi, and Yass Island has right now four pretty amazing theme parks. I think it's called Yass Water World. It has SeaWorld Abu Dhabi, which is an incredible indoor park. It has the home to the fastest coaster in the world, Formula Rossa in Ferrari World, and then it has the Warner Brothers indoor park. I think it's just called Warner Brothers World. There might be a technical name that I'm missing
Mhm.
there. These are amazing parks. They've said they're going to spend a bunch of new money. They said they're getting four new rides at the Warner Brothers park, which is like, how do you just add in four new rides?
Yeah.
What is going on? But not, all of that is taking the back seat now because they announced last Wednesday morning that in partnership with the Walt Disney Company, they will be opening the seventh Disney resort on Yas Island. You can see there's only really one rendering of the park, but it has like some crazy stuff in it.
Yeah.
And they
It-
said high tech, which I'm like, if the other parks aren't high tech on Yas Island,
yeah.
what is this one going to be? This is going to be crazy.
I can only imagine because there's a crazy amount of money in that part of the world, and it's really it is a big competition area for years, and it's not going to end. It's going to continue going, but for years it's always been the competition in Orlando. Yeah, there's competition out in Los Angeles, but I would contend that the greater competition in the states is Orlando, and now there's just all out competition flying right and left from all sorts of parks and operators in the Middle East, and it's really going to become this gigantic uh, tourist area
Yeah.
because you have the Ferrari. Is it called Ferrari World?
Yeah.
Okay, and then Disney's going there. There's Six Flags over there, and has Universal did they announce one over there, or is that or am I
They
dreaming that?
they don't, but there's a park called Motion Gate, which literally has all the
Okay,
same keys as Universal, and it's also in the UAE. Not
so
operated by
now
you.
with Disney when they open this, is Disney going to? They've obviously opened the partnership with this. Is that company going to manage it, or are they? Because I don't really know a whole lot about that company. Do they have any other things other than management they bring to the table, or are they just going to
Yeah,
be the ones that manage?
the money they're bringing to the table is the
They're
main
bringing,
thing.
bringing the money
Yeah. So
because
so
Mickey's pockets must be empty, I guess.
yeah, well, I mean, not after this. I'm a cast member at Walt Disney World. Let me just say, I have literally this is so disconnected from this. I'm just being, this kid from Cincinnati, Ohio, talking about theme parks here, not any relation to the company. But I can imagine most certainly that in order to get the rights, the licenses to all these IPs to put the name Disney on the park,
Hmm.
Mickey put a pretty big chunk of change in his pocket recently from that. So the park also, by the way, Disney is not going to let you. They're not going to sell their name to a park operator that's not going to run their park up to the Disney standard, right? So they're
Hmm.
not going to let you. They're not, if Frontier City in Oklahoma was like, "Hey, we have infinite money and we're going to just pay you to let us be Disney's Frontier City," Disney would say no, because that's not a good
Right,
enough park for Disney. Nothing against Frontier City, they're just not the same thing. One's
right.
total immersion and themes and all this stuff. So the rides that are developed there have to be developed by Imagineers. So WDI now has a bunch of labor, work for their crew as well. Then on top of that, you have the merchandising that like that money's still going to go to Disney because every time they buy a new Pooh Bear to sell, Disney's getting a cut out. So this is going to be tremendous for the company of Disney, and even more than that, it's going to be tremendous for Miral because Miral, I was saying last week on the show, Miral needs to figure out a way to get people from the US to go there. That was my
Mhm.
big thing. I said like they should do a preview center or something like this to have the money. You know what? My preview center idea was really stupid. The better idea is get the name Disney on one of their parks and it'll work. That's all they needed to do.
Yeah.
Uh, and so who knows how popular not only this park will be, but how popular like even Legoland Dubai, Legoland Abu Dhabi, which is not owned by Yass Island, not on Yass Island, not owned by Miral. I still bet it sees a huge rise in popularity once this park opens because a high tide rises all boats.
Hmm. Now, I wonder long term, and actually, the question before that, did they? I was flipping through one of the articles, I guess, on this. Had they listed a opening date or prospective opening date for it yet?
I've seen nothing. So I would
Okay,
imagine 2031,
yeah.
sounds about right. I
It's a-
mean, they're going to build
how
it
long did it
all in
take Epic Universe to come about?
about 5 years, all in all.
About
But it
five,
got
and that
killed.
doesn't. Right. It was. They were getting ready to build it, and then COVID hit, and they seemed like they canceled it altogether. Then they started it back up. But from
Yeah,
the time they started back up, and was that in 21 or 22? About
yeah, something like that.
3 years. So, but
Yeah,
they probably another tack on another year or two to that because they probably just pulled the plans off the shelf and picked them right back up. But
yeah,
yeah, so this is not going to be happen overnight. But at the same time, I wonder in the future what this means long term for theme park tourism in the United States because there've been in the last decade alone a lot of parks open in the Middle East and a
yeah,
lot of parks have been announced for Europe. So those tourists that would traditionally come from Europe across the Atlantic or even from Asia come across, there's new destinations now. Now
yeah,
I don't think the theme parks are going to suffer, but it'll definitely be a different dynamic and different crowds that come, perhaps.
yeah. But even across the sea, I think there's still a bit of like, okay, there's because I think you're absolutely right. Like someone from Spain or someone from,
Right.
you know, um, Egypt. Okay, I live in Alexandria, and I'm like, I'm gonna go to Disney World. Okay, well now I can go here. I don't have to go to Disney
Right.
World. But there's also this real thing I think where people go to theme parks and people love them, and I think if you polled Americans of raise your hand if you've been to Disney World, raise your hand if you've been to Universal Orlando. The, there's a tremendous amount of overlap there. And I would imagine that even raise your hand if you've been to Disney World, raise your hand if you've been to Disneyland. There's a lot more overlap there than what you might think.
Right.
Because I just like people go to one, they love it, and they want to go to the other. And so I imagine there will be maybe even an increase in tourism from the Middle East to at least Central Florida, just because wow, this park is so cool. Let's go to Disney
Mhm.
World bigger and maybe a little less
I
high
can see
tech
that.
but bigger. So did you see in the rendering the castle in air quotes that it looks like they have at this new park? Well, it kind of looks like what I think it is. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying here, but it kind of looks like Ariel's grotto. If you've seen like the 1993 animated TV show The Little Mermaid, it then if you haven't, by the way, what are you doing? But no, if you have seen that, the King Triton's castle in there, I think it kind of looks like that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm looking at a rendering on it on
Okay,
the yeah, there we go. It
yeah,
kind of does a little bit.
yeah. I don't know. Maybe that would be cool. I'm sure there will be like rides and things about this park. Like no idea. Like just like we're
Yeah.
so far away from knowing, and I do wonder also. Yas Island has been very good about very serious in the sense that they want to make their parks accessible for people who speak different languages. So the park, I mean, it's an Arabic speaking country, but there almost all of the signage is also in English, which is super helpful to attract European and obviously American tourists. But and I'm sure this will be of no exception
Mm-hmm.
at all. But I also wonder, like, so Tokyo Disneyland and Tokyo Disney Sea, which also, by the way, is operated by a third party. There you have some rides where it's like you ride Pirates of the Caribbean at Tokyo Disneyland, and there is literally all the dialogue is in Japanese. Like all the animatronics speak Japanese. So I wonder what, if that's the route they'll go, or if they'll go the other, kind of they speak English, but maybe there's a system in place to switch off or to hear both, or I don't know. But I'm sure they'll
Yeah,
they'll do it.
it'd be interesting because a lot of parks that you go to, if there's a second language that is spoken there, whether it's the first one or the second one, it's usually English. Now, going to parks in the Middle East, there's probably going to be a significant number of people speaking Chinese or Mandarin, maybe
Yeah.
people speaking Russian, people speaking German, speaking Spanish, French, English. So, I mean, it's kind of okay, is there going to be this line over here if you need to talk to somebody in German, this line
Yeah.
up here if you need to talk to, excuse me, sprechen Sie Deutsch. This line here if you need to speak somebody in Japanese, whatever the language
Yeah.
may be, you're definitely going to get a bigger array of languages spoken at these parks.
Yeah. Probably this park, the new Disney park, will be the the single park in the world that has the most people speaking the most different languages
I
for the
bet.
most different is coming in, because it's in the middle. It's the middle. It's the first word in the phrase Middle East is middle. So that's interesting. But also with the high tech aspects, they might just crush it so hard that you don't even notice. They might just have such a good method of keeping things connected via mobile
Yeah.
app, via whatever it may be, that you're just like, wow, I feel like this park is in English, or, qué fantástico, yo pienso esta parque es en español. You might think that too. I don't know.
No hablo francés. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's my good mashup. I don't know. Get every language in there, and someone will pick up something from it.
that's right.
But
That's
no,
right.
so we just have to figure what news item are we going to miss that's going to announce Thursday morning.
Yeah,
And that's going to be the next big thing.
I'm sure it'll be something, but that's all right. It's all right.
All right. All right, Clete. Well, today last week we had a great interview with Cassie and talking about all things Universal. Today we're going to change it up a little bit and talk about the northern shore of Ohio, which everybody knows is the home of Cedar Point. And our guest today is the executive director of the downtown Sandusky Cedar Point History Museum. I had to write that down to make sure I got it all. Mr. David Kamen, and he joins us today, and we're going to talk about the Cedar Point Museum. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Thank
From
you
one
very
David
much.
to the other.
Just very excited to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
We're excited to have you.
As the only person on the show right now who is not named David, I'm a little bit overwhelmed by the persistence of the Davids sneaking through. It's overwhelming.
It's not as bad as being the only person that hadn't been to Epic Universe last week.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. That was probably worse.
All right.
Well, David,
let's go for it. Go for it, Clete.
all right, yeah, let's get started. I want to hear a little bit about Cedar Point Museum. How did that get started? Where did the idea for a Cedar Point Museum come from?
Well, if you think the excitement about Epic Universe was monumental, it pales in comparison to the excitement about the opening of the downtown Sandusky Cedar Point Historical Museum. And it is quite a story, but just monumental excitement about its opening. Way back before either of you were born, I was born in Sandusky, Ohio. I was raised here. And the summer I graduated from high school, I was blessed with the opportunity to work at Cedar Point. And I had the very, very unique job of working from 11:30 at night till 8 in the morning. And my job was to change light bulbs. And so
Oh,
I
wow.
had access to every single ride. I had keys to everything, and I got to climb around. I had no fear of heights, and I got to climb around all of those rides. And from 4 a.m. to 4:30 in the morning, I got a break. And Cedar Point has a beautiful beach. And I would spend my breaks on many a night down on that beautiful beach, and I would see the shooting stars overhead. At that point in time, way back when, there was a huge ride, very tall ride called the Space Spiral, much like SeaWorld's Space Spiral in Orlando. And I would ride up on the carriage, climb through the crow's nest, climb that needle first thing in the morning, and change the light bulb way up there on top of the Space Spiral. And felt like I was the first one in all of Northern Ohio to see the sunrise. But the bottom line of all of that is I fell in love with Cedar Point. I fell in love with the peninsula. I was telling my dad and mother about, my just how much I loved the job. My dad had about a half dozen postcards, old Cedar Point postcards at that time. So in the early 70s, I started collecting postcards, and I realized that Cedar Point is Sandusky, Sandusky is Cedar Point. But I moved away for college, and for the next 50 years, while I did not live in Sandusky, my love of Cedar Point never subsided. And so I started collecting postcards, collecting over 2,000 postcards. But over the past 50 years, that postcard collection expanded to pennants, and then it expanded to plates, and then it expanded to everything that you could think of. I was very, very blessed to have a good job, to get a big house, and I started filling first my office and then other parts of my house with all of this Cedar Point memorabilia. And I just loved the emotion of the park. It's more than a place. It is an emotion. It's a happiness. It's a joy. The sights and sounds, the smells of the French fries at Cedar Point. It's all about family and family togetherness. And one of the things I always told everybody is, when you're heading down one of those first hills of one of those roller coasters, no matter how bad something's going on in your life, you can't think of it because you just want to exist riding down that roller coaster. And so the story of how the downtown Sandusky Cedar Point Historical Museum begins with me collecting all of this different memorabilia from just my love of working at the park for those four summers. I started getting or going to estate sales. I have 3 sons, one of whom works for Epic Universe, by the way, but have 3 sons. And we went out to garage sales. We traveled all through Ohio going to estate sales. This, of course, was all before eBay. And I was getting, banners and plates and books and badges and ride opening ribbons. And we all had passes to Cedar Point and just kept going and going and going. Throughout that time, I also collected every Cedar Point park map from 1969 through last year. I was there when they took the old mill race flume ride down to build the Raptor. I was there when the pirate ride and the earthquake rides were there, and able to get one of the old lanterns from the back of the pirate ride boats that went through the pirate ride. The paddle wheel boats existed at that time. And I was able to I walked into an antique store, and this was 40 years ago, but they had an 18-inch model of every one of the paddle wheel boats, with all of a little model of all of the animations. So many people remember this. They comment it when they come through the museum, but there was actually a set of beavers, and they would gnaw away at a tree, and the boat would slow down, paddle wheel boat would slow down, and the tree would fall down, and then the paddle wheel boat would start to pull away, and the tree would pop back up. And it was a big thrill for everybody to watch that. And there were different games at Cedar Point at that point in time. A fascination game, which was one of the first things air conditioned on the peninsula. And so many people had fond memories of that. So I just collected all of these things, and restaurant menus and unique items from when all of the different coasters opened. Because I worked there in the 70s, became friends with some of the people that went on to run Cedar Point. And so some of the general managers, some of the people that had maintenance and so on. And so I was blessed with the opportunity to be a first rider for Magnum, a first rider for Millennium, a first rider for Raptor, for Power Tower. And when they did first riders, they gave out medallions. And so a lot of the ace coaster people that come in will brag, well, I have this medallion or I have that medallion. We have every single one of those opening rider medallions. When they opened Valraven 8 years ago, they passed out the opening rider memorabilia, but they also gave everyone a cookie to show you the type of guy I am. Everybody else ate their cookie on opening day. I saved it, preserved it in a bag, and still have that today for display in the museum. Around the right after COVID, the 22, early 23, Cedar Point announced that they were not going to reopen their town hall museum. And Cedar Point had a wonderful museum out in Frontier Town called the Town Hall Museum. It had a lot of the red ruby glassware. It had a lot of postcards in it. It had a couple different models. But for whatever reason, Cedar Point announced they were not going to reopen the Town Hall Museum. At the same time they announced that, I was retiring from my job of 43 years, and we actually moved back to Sandusky. And so again, as I said in the beginning, Cedar Point has always been Sandusky. Sandusky has always been Cedar Point. And Cedar Point is clearly Sandusky's oldest business, over 150 years. And so in an attempt to preserve that history of Sandusky, I, in my mind, got the idea of maybe I could open up a Cedar Point museum. I approached the Cedar Fair Six Flags folks, asked them for permission. Again, this was after they decided not to open their museum. And initially, there was a lot going on with the transition, the merger of the two companies. So I didn't get a response. And so I decided to go forward, and I incorporated the Sandusky CP Museum, the Sandusky CP Museum. And then I went on and I got IRS 501c3 qualification, so that if people donated something, they could write it off as a tax deduction, just like if you give something to Goodwill. And so when I moved from outside of Cleveland back to Sandusky, all of these items that I had collected over the years, which was quite a significant amount. I thought at the time I was the largest private Cedar Point collector, and all of these things were in bins. And so I didn't know anything about running a museum. So in the winter of 23, I started traveling through all types of different museums throughout Ohio, the Milan Edison Museum, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum, all the big museums in Cleveland, the Great Lakes Museum. And I started at that same time visiting different locations that were available in downtown Sandusky, with my desire to open a storefront downtown Sandusky where people could see my collection, and at the same time bring them into downtown Sandusky. And so I was visiting all of these museums. I had all this stuff in bins. And then again, as I've said, I've been blessed many times in my life. In downtown Sandusky, you had them on a previous podcast. there is an entity known as the Merry-Go-Round Museum. And their executive director, Curry Lewis, the person that really runs the place on a day-to-day basis, Bonnie Beam, you interviewed, and they have a board member there who is named Michael Young. And I knew Mike Young from running the Cedar Point Marina. So I called him up and said, hey, I don't know anything about museums. Could I buy you dinner and you tell me how to run a museum? And so I had dinner with Michael Young. We are talking, and I'm telling him about my trek to try to find a storefront in Sandusky, downtown Sandusky. And a light bulb went off in his head over dinner. And he said, hey, David, tomorrow I want you to come and visit the Merry-Go-Round Museum. We have a good-sized room off the Merry-Go-Round Museum that's basically just used for storage right now. But I want you to look at it because it could be a perfect marriage. What better marriage with all your Cedar Point memorabilia and the Merry-Go-Round Museum? And it would be good for both of us. They would be providing the location. They had all the technical know-how of how to run a museum. And at the same time, it would be providing me with a home for all of these Cedar Point memorabilia that I had. I went the next day, I looked at the room. This is in an old, beautiful post office, but the walls were crumbling, the lighting was bad, the floor was bad, but I could see Michael's vision of the perfect marriage that this would become. And so I went ahead and signed a lease to rent out this space at the Merry-Go-Round Museum. And I was going forward with my Sandusky CP Museum and my IRS nonprofit basis. I had one of my sons develop a nice logo for us. You can see it here on my shirt with the part of the blue streak, the space spiral, and also back in the early 1900s, Cedar Point had a woman with an umbrella over her head down on the beach, and that became our neat logo. I met with in the fall of 24. Again, we're just talking about the fall of last year, a group of Cedar Point employees. There's a alumni association, if you will. And I did my first presentation and excitedly told them about my start of the Sandusky CP Museum. They went out, and the next day I started getting emails and text messages from them. And they all told me that they went to Facebook to look me up. And what do you think they told me? I was blocked because in Facebook vernacular, CP stands for child pornography. And so nobody could get to meet with me. Nobody could get to our social media pages because they were blocked. But I was going forward with the project. I had my space. I met the wood carver on the Frontier Trail of Cedar Point. And Paul Kerner, starting in 1996, would take a block of wood each summer, and he would carve a unique Cedar Point item, a swan boat, a hippopotamus from Kittyland, a miniature space spiral. And this wood carver every year would make a different item. And some years he could make 3 of them if they were complex, other years a dozen. But we had the entire collection of all Paul's wood carvings, including miniature trash cans from Cedar Point over all the years. You wouldn't believe that there's a couple dozen different trash can designs, but we had all of those. And so I ordered some specialized display cases because the lighting was not the best in this room. Every one of the display cases has LED lighting. And when Cedar Point closed their Frontier Town Museum, some of the stuff was on loan from some families in Sandusky. And unfortunately, the cases it was in were not locked. And so our cases also locked. So I started getting these cases in. And I actually ordered 17 of the huge display cases. Clete, maybe you could put up the first picture for us. And so that's what, those are 2 1/3 there of the display cases. But you can see that I started putting my items into these display cases. And I really had, again, no experience with the museum. So you can see I have pennants hanging, I have pictures hanging, I have a model of the GA Beckling, and I have boats in different places. But then one of the best things that could happen to me, and that is, again, this Mike Young, who had connected me with the Merry-Go-Round Museum itself, connected me with a Cedar Point employee who had retired after 35 years. She was the director of park admissions, and her name was Candy Frankowski. And Candy was actually in charge of the Cedar Point Museum. She's retired now, but I met her at the museum in the room you're looking at now, and maybe you can show the next picture. But I met her in this room, and she looked at what I had put on the shelves, and her immediate reaction was, David, no, no, no. And I had a mishmash of everything. I had no real organization. And Candy brought to our museum just the tremendous experience and know-how that was needed. We also ran into and met, and he became the president of our board, Ken Miller, who is the author of the big tabletop book, Cedar Point Rolling Through the Years. And Ken is the one that we put all of our information in chronological order. And so again, we sorry about that. We put all of our information into chronological order and started filling in, as you can see in this picture, what amounts to 17 different display cases with banners across the top. Towards the back of the picture, the Merry-Go-Round Museum actually had replicas of 2 of the very significant merry-go-round horses of Cedar Point. One is called the Ghost Horse, and it was on the Frontier Town Carousel that's now in Dorney Park. And the other one is the famous Armored Horse, which is on the main. They even made a stamp after that. And so Candy brought tremendous excitement, but more so organization to the museum. You can see in the center of the picture here, we have a 6-foot-high replica of the space spiral. If you run to the next picture, you can see there that that is Carrie Boardman, the former general manager of Cedar Point. Tony Clark is in the picture on the far right, the communications director of Cedar Point. Candy is the one in the blue there. But again, the Cedar Point people met with us in the fall of 24, gave us some great suggestions, but more importantly, they were very enthusiastic and excited about what we were doing with the museum. If you run to the next picture, as fate would have it, the merger between Six Flags and Cedar Fair was completed, and we heard then from a former general manager, Jason McClure, who said, David, your group can have permission to have the name of the Downtown Sandusky Cedar Point Historical Museum. Thank you. Another blessing. No longer did we have the Battle of Sandusky CP Museum. Now we could officially, with their permission, use the name Downtown Sandusky Cedar Point Historical Museum. And you can see our logo there again with some of the old Cedar Point things. And so now all of our social media goes by Downtown Sandusky Cedar Point Historical Museum. We're not blocked anymore. And we've had just a number of guests come in, not just locally from Ohio, but because of getting some tremendous media exposure from folks like the both of you with your podcast. We've had people come in from all over the country. So some of the ACE people from down in Texas flew up and visited with us. We've had a lot of people coming in from Michigan, Indiana, Pennsylvania. And so it has really worked out wonderful. If you go to the next picture, we have an old entrance sign from Cedar Point. You can see that blue streak sign there. Those signs were throughout the park in the late 60s and 70s. And we have that full-sized one, but then we have replicas of all of the little ones. We have a kiddie coaster there that for 50 cents, little kids can actually ride a simulator of either the Blue Streak or the Gemini. They can pick their ride. And so it has just been a tremendous experience because we opened our agreement with the Merry-Go-Round Museum was they're closed all of January, and we would open full time at the beginning of February. But in reality, we were able to open last year on December 4th. And throughout the month of December last year, we just had a tremendous number of visitors, and the word got out in Sandusky that we were doing this. And earlier I talked about the enthusiasm and the anticipation for Epic Universe. Well, again, the enthusiasm for the downtown Sandusky Cedar Point Historical Museum just blew me out of the water because so many residents, so many people that had visited Cedar Point over the years started showing up at the Merry-Go-Round Museum. And I filled those 17 display cases with my items. But since then, we've had to add 10 more display cases, take over even more space because so many people have donated just very, very unique items that they had in their collection. We really want to be the repository for all things Cedar Point. And so we have just received a tremendous outpouring of support with people donating to us so many unique and different items. And we also, if you want to roll to the next picture, we also have met some wonderful people. For 30 years, from you could see there 65 to 94, where the corkscrew is now, there was a thing called Jungle Larry Safari Island. And Jungle Larry, of course, has passed away, but his wife in this picture on the far left, Safari Jane, still alive down in Naples. I was able to get her phone number. I was hoping she would talk to me for 5 minutes. We ended up talking over an hour. She said, oh, I have some shirts that Larry and I wore in the 80s. His still has a Coke stain on it, but if you want it, I'll send them to you. So we have those shirts on display in the museum. We have the jacket, a lot of the name tags. On the right in this picture is her son, Tim, who is still a regular traveler to Africa, a big conservationist, but just a wonderful opportunity to meet with them. If you roll to the next picture. We've also had special events at the Merry-Go-Round Museum. Cedar Point does a winter chill out in February. And the night of the winter chill out, we had the book author Ken Miller, who, as I said, is the president of our board, do a presentation on unique and little known aspects of Cedar Point. When the first traffic accident on the chaussee going over to Cedar Point occurred, and just some really fun facts. And we had over 100 people attend that. So many of the former Cedar Point general managers, Don Myers, Kerry Boardman, Dan Keller, have given us a tremendous number of items. There is a former general manager that wrote a book on Cedar Point, John Hildebrand. And after World War I, the veterans had a convention at Cedar Point, and everyone that attended got a miniature World War I helmet with Cedar Point emblazoned on it. And again, John Hildebrand gave us one of those very, very unique World War I helmets. Our oldest item in the museum is from 1893. And now we go all the way forward to the 150-year anniversary. And as I said, we have the opening first rider medallion for every one of the modern coasters. And so people are just loving the museum. If you roll to the next picture, you can see there just the tremendous number of items and variety of items that we had. And everyone loved the Frontier Town Town Hall Museum. And that Frontier Town Hall Museum had hundreds of items. Our museum now, which is a part of the Merry-Go-Round Museum, has thousands of items. And so I would really love everyone to visit. And as I said, it is a perfect marriage with the Merry-Go-Round Museum. If you roll to the next slide, again, you can see some of the very unique and rare items. Just the blue china on that second shelf there are items that many people have never seen before. And again, we've received so many donations now. This whole display case is full of items that were not a part of my collection. When we started out, the items were probably 90% mine. The initial person who wrote the book on Cedar Point was named David Francis, and his estate, his niece, donated a tremendous amount. Candy Frankowski filled in a lot of holes. But now people have just come out of the woodwork and donated just so many different items. On the next picture, again, you can just see the great number of items that are in our display cases. On the next picture, that is Candy Frankowski. And again, she is the curator of the museum. She is the reason for the success. But with the banners up, with the pictures up, with all those different items in the museum, that is the view of one direction. And now the picture, next picture, shows you that we have billboards up throughout the area, and we are now open. And as it says in the bottom of this billboard, we are included with the Merry-Go-Round Museum admission. So you are getting two phenomenal museums for the price of one. And what is just really fabulous is people go through our museum, and then when they get done, they see all those carousel horses, all the historical aspects of the carousel horses. But most importantly, then they get to ride a carousel. And so you can't beat that. What is a more perfect marriage? Nothing is a more perfect marriage than having all of this Cedar Point memorabilia with the opportunity to see all of those merry-go-round horses, to see actual wood carvers doing their work, but then to ride a merry-go-round and hear that wonderful music from the merry-go-round itself. So again, it has just been wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And if you think the excitement of Epic Universe is up there, you haven't seen
I knew that was coming.
You haven't seen anything. So you've seen the downtown Sandusky Cedar Point Historical Museum.
Now, David, you said you work for Cedar Point. What was your last year working there? Because you said you retired from somewhere, so I'm assuming it wasn't from Cedar Fair.
Correct. I just worked 4 summers during college there, changing light bulbs. They looked at me and they said, "We think this guy can remember right to tight and left to loose." And so they gave me the job of changing light bulbs. And back then I had no fear of heights. And so I got to climb around everything. It just the top of all those rides. It was just amazing. And so
I can only imagine.
So many people have come in and they met their spouse at Cedar Point. We have a visitor's log now that people sign in. And one of the joys of working there is just everybody has a Cedar Point story. A lady about 30 years ago, an elderly lady about 30 years ago, donated to me a pail and a shovel. And in 1906, the pail is engraved with the Hotel Breakers picture, And she said that in 1906, she was visiting Cedar Point with her grandfather. He bought her that pail and shovel. She went down on the beach and played with it, kept it in her sandbox for years, put it into her garage for decades, and then donated that to us. And so it's just the joyous family stories like that just make it such a pleasurable, fun place.
So you've mentioned lots of people from Cedar Point being involved and extremely helpful with the museum. How affiliated with Cedar Point, with Cedar Fair, with Six Flags are you as the museum?
We as a museum are not affiliated with Cedar Fair or Cedar Point, and we're not supported financially by Cedar Fair or Six Flags or Cedar Point. But we do have a tremendous relationship with them. Everyone knows Tony Clark, the communications director. He's like the most famous person of Cedar Point right now. And he has agreed, as things go on, when they come out with the new ride, Siren's Curse, some of the memorabilia, he's agreed to save some of that for us. Kerry Boardman, the former general manager who retired at the end of the year, worked with us, and we have a big backdrop up right now of Snake River Falls. And Snake River Falls is a boat ride that they took down last year, a water flume ride that they removed at the end of last year. However, they are going to be reducing the size of that boat, giving us the front, like 1/3 of it. They're painting it for us, and we will be able to set that in front of that backdrop and have a photo opportunity for everybody. And so it's really cool. So officially, we're not affiliated or funded by Six Flags or Cedar Point, but the relationship is wonderful. And as I said, throughout all of history, Sandusky is Cedar Point is Sandusky. And so it's a wonderful relationship we have with them.
Well, David, I want to go back on something that you mentioned, and not to, I don't want to hear anybody demean any position that talks about changing light bulbs.
Okay.
Now, I'm actually serious about that, because nothing drives me nuts than to go to a park, and whether or not it's a theme park, or it's a zoo, or it's a stadium. It drives me nuts to see ambient lighting that is supposed to be part of the background, the experience, and there's just burnout bulbs everywhere. And that just drives me nuts. So for someone like me, it may be a little bit OCD on that, but for someone like me, that is a valuable piece there, because I think there's a lot of parks that's just not one of their priorities. So therefore, you have a string of 100 lights and 20 of them are out.
Right. So, and very true. I would show up at 11:30 at night, and just to show the quality of operation of Cedar Point is that I would show up, and the ride operators during the evening, when they would turn their lights on, if they saw lights out, they would write it on a work order. And when I showed up at 11:30, I had a listing of lights that were out. And at Cedar Point still today, there's a giant wheel. And back in the day, the axle of that giant wheel, I would actually climb up and down that axle. There's a ladder on it. I'd have a newspaper bag with light bulbs in it, and then another one that was empty. And I had a little TV remote that was called an incher. And I could move that giant wheel inches at a time, and I'd climb up and down and change all of those light bulbs.
Oh, my word.
And to your point, David, if there were 10 lights in a row out on that giant wheel, it was very noticeable. And so I would hear about it. Today, we're blessed with the new LED lighting. And so, of course, that lasts a lot longer, requires a lot less maintenance. But again, I have an appreciation, as you do as well, then, for just the lighting of the different parks. And they are beautiful at night.
Now, I want to hear a little bit more about your experience changing the light bulb at the top of the observation tower. That could get me to break out into a cold sweat just hearing about it.
That one really wasn't that bad, because I never felt threatened. You would ride on the top of the carriage up to the top of the tower, and then where the crow's nest is.
Right. Hold on. Ride on top of the carriage?
Yes, right on top of the carriage.
Like you're not inside, you're on top of it.
You're on top of it. That was fun. That was cool. And then there's the crow's nest. And again, if you think of SeaWorlds, same thing. There's a crow's nest. And you go inside the crow's nest, and there's like a submarine ladder, and you climb up that ladder, and then you come out on the top of the crow's nest. And at Cedar Point, way back then, they had a little Volkswagen motor up there, and they had a pair of breeches and a vest, and you would put that on, and they would connect you to a wire in case you passed out. But there were little spokes going up the needle, and you would then climb up those spokes, take the cover off, replace the 2 light bulbs, and climb back down. But the space spiral, if it was windy, it would actually sway 12 feet in either direction. And so we always did that.
12 feet?
In either direction. And so you would always do it first thing in the morning at daybreak when everything was very, very still. But again, there was not a more beautiful place on earth, in my opinion, than being up there on the top of that space pile. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And again, I could be the first person in Northern Ohio to see the sun come up. It was just great. But no fear of heights. No fear of heights.
I could go there with the view, but I could think of about at least 10 places I'd rather be. At least.
I was 18 years old, and I just loved it. And again, friends that I have today are friends I made working there. And so it's just a place where there's a tremendous number of kids that come in and work together and make lifelong friends.
Yeah, for sure. So you have this life of experience with Cedar Point, and it leads me to wonder, of all of the attractions that are no longer with us on the peninsula, which is the one that when it was closing, which single attraction was the most, I don't know, maybe heartbreaking, we'll say, to hear the closure of?
Again, the very high ride was called the Space Spiral. And so the Space Spiral coming down, seeing the pictures of it falling, that was the most heartbreaking. In the museum, we actually have pieces of the Space Spiral, and so the very heavy steel from the tube that went up. There's actually some pictures of me up that needle from 1974. Before radios were so prevalent, if the ride had a trouble when it was up at the top, there was a crank telephone that they would call down to the ride operators below, and we have that crank telephone. And so it's just so many unique items that we have. But I am a lover of amusement parks, and so some people get very upset when one of the parks is, one of the rides attractions is removed. When it's removed, I'm sad, but at the same time, I'm excited to see what's next, because especially at Cedar Point, whenever they've removed something, it hasn't been too long before they brought something in that was just even better and made people forget it. But again, if you've ever been to Cedar Point on Halloween weekends, they have their graveyard of dead rides, and it's just so much fun. It's just they honor also their history. Things like the earthquake and the pirate ride, the giant slide. It's just a lot of good memories there. People all ages come in, and they have a different Cedar Point memory. And a lot of people, their favorite ride is actually the beach. It has the most beautiful beach. We have an entire display because in the 1910s, 20s, the beach was the main attraction. And so again, we have a lot of memorabilia from people in the beach. Other questions?
What's coming up? What's coming in the future? Are there future exhibits coming, or what can we expect to come?
David, because of the volume of items that we've received, and I said we started out with 17 of those display cases, added 10 more. The Merry-Go-Round Museum has been so wonderful in sharing space with us. What's coming up in the immediate future, of course, is when we get that Snake River Falls boat. That will be phenomenal because a lot of people love that. But Candy Frankowski now has started a rotation of our display cases. So in June, Coaster Mania is going to occur at Cedar Point, and there's wine festivals around Sandusky. So we're going to have a display case of just all Coaster Mania buttons and memorabilia from over the years. We're going to have a display case of just the different wine glasses and so on over the years. In 1963, a woman from Sandusky was crowned at the Cedar Point Ballroom, and she went on to become Miss Ohio, Miss America. Her name is Jackie Mayer. She's donated her gloves from when she was crowned and a lot of the memorabilia from that event. And so we're going to have a Jackie Mayer Day at Cedar Point. And so basically what we're doing now is not just having a display, but I would really call it a rotating display. As another example, in March of this year, downtown Sandusky had Restaurant Week. Well, there's a lot of restaurants that existed at Cedar Point in the past that are no longer in existence, but we have menus, we have plates, we have glasses. Surf's Up was a really cool lounge in the 60s and 70s in the Hotel Breakers, and we have a lot of Surf's Up glasses. A lot of people remember the Silver Dollar Cafe, and we have the Silver Dollar menus. And so again, what's up in the future? We've transferred from establishing the museum now to just rotating a lot of the items through, having them up for a month or so, and then taking them down. We're also, people just love the park maps, the paper park maps. And so again, we're right now, yesterday, today, in the process of installing on these flip boards, all of the park maps from 1967 on. And what I've seen happen is people come in and say, oh, I worked there in 1983, and they go to the park maps, open up the 83 map, and they're able to show their children or their grandchildren, here's where my ride was. And again, to Clete's point, that ride might not be there anymore, but they're able to point physically to it on the map. So it's just a lot of memorabilia and items, and just what's coming up is just bigger and better every day. And we think, oh boy, we have, euphoria, we have the best. And then the next day somebody walks in with something we didn't even know existed, and it's just really cool, but a lot of people can relate to it. There was a Caulfield's candy at Cedar Point for years, and yeah, we knew it existed, but one of the Sandusky residents walked up to the front door, dropped off a Caulfield's candy sign that was above their stand for 30 or 40 years. And so it's things like that where we're really preserving the history of Cedar Point, but having a lot of fun doing it.
Cool.
It's cool. When you, Clete, have your choice, am I going to go to Epic Universe, or am I going to go to the downtown Sandusky Cedar Point Historical Museum? There's no doubt in my mind which one you're going to go to.
No doubt in my mind either. Let me tell you. And I will say it's very exciting to hear all of the cool artifacts and pieces of memorabilia and slices of history that you have in the museum. But it's also really cool to hear just how excited and how much you care about this museum and this place. And I mean, we all know in any sort of entertainment center, in any sort of theme park, in any sort of museum, it's the passion and the love of the game that the employees, that the family running the place has, that brings it to the next level every time, no matter what. And so that is another great benefit that makes me want to, make my way out there for sure.
Thank you. And we had a board meeting last night, and there's 10 people sitting around a table, and they are all just so very excited about all of this and talking about its future and talking about the different displays. And so it is true that, people love Cedar Point, but it's more than a place. It's an emotion. It's in your heart. And different items bring back different memories. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful feeling. And when I started, I said, when you're going down the hill of a roller coaster, you can't think of your problems. And I like to say, when you're at the Cedar Point Museum, you're going to enjoy it so much, you're not going to be thinking about any of your real world problems.
I love that.
Yeah, and the great thing about a museum like Cedar Point, because it's very location specific, and the Merry-Go-Round Museum is is artifacts from other places. And of course, you might come across one that you recognize that might have been at a park that you've been at. But with the Cedar Point Museum specifically, you can transport people literally that are standing there looking at an object and transport them back in time to that particular time and place, which is really cool. And because museums can do that unlike any other medium that's out there. And the really cool part about that is things keep getting donated. And I think that the follow-up question I have from before is, will we ever see the downtown Sandusky Cedar Point History Museum? Make sure I say that right. Will there ever be a standalone location to it? Because your exhibits are just outgrown its facility.
Well, I don't think so. I think that we've discovered the euphoric, perfect marriage of being able to ride a merry-go-round. Again, we attract all ages. The amount of items that we have from 1910, 1920, 1940, 1960, we attract all those ages, but we also attract the 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds because they can come in, they can sketch a merry-go-round horse, they can crayon a merry-go-round horse, but then all of those groups together as a family can get on the merry-go-round and ride it. And so, is that possible at some time in the future? Maybe, but certainly not in my plans, because I think that is a perfect marriage together. And as I said, we started this out as a tenant of the Merry-Go-Round Museum, but I think it's going to be a long-term relationship because people are getting 2 museums now for the price of one, and it's working out very, very well. And so I think we just have a bigger attraction having that merry-go-round music playing in the background, having that merry-go-round that they can ride there, having those hundreds of horses and the history of those horses connected with the Cedar Point artifacts. Just wonderful.
And it is a great experience going there. I was telling Bonnie when she was on the podcast a few weeks ago that literally we came up the day before. There was an event happening at Cedar Point on the following day, and we came up and just looking for things to do in downtown Sandusky. Mr. Smith's Coffee across the street, excellent place. If you go to downtown Sandusky, you got to hit it. But literally, we walked up to the museum, and this is before. I think they were talking about this may have been coming. This is back in July of last year. I don't know when everything came together,
right?
But I only know it hadn't opened yet. We walked in thinking, well, we might be in here 15 minutes. We didn't know, and in the price, I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't outlandishly expensive. So we thought, we'll be in here 15 minutes. It'll be something neat to go in, take a couple of pictures. We were there 3 hours. And literally, we probably could have stayed longer. But and I can only imagine this would probably tack on another hour to it. But it's a great experience.
Correct. You're absolutely correct. And in the Cedar Point Museum now, we've added videos. When we started out, we had a video of talking about the history of Cedar Point, but people have donated now 6 additional. So we have the marketing video, which has time lapse of Raptor being built. We have a marketing video of Millennium. And so people remember seeing part of those on television when they came out, but we have them now playing in the museum. And so you're right. We've had people in the Cedar Point Museum for a couple hours easily, just looking at all the different items. And so again, it is 2 museums for the price of one. And it's in this historic old post office building with the big circular rotunda. And that's a perfect place for the merry-go-round.
That works too.
And the thing for me, my career, I had no idea of how to operate a museum, and how blessed am I to every day have Bonnie there to guide me, to tell me what to do, what not to do. And so bringing that experience to the table, her and the executive director, Curry Lewis, it's just wonderful having that. And so, Clete, going back to your statement of would we ever do a standalone, boy, I just love having their experience to guide us there. So it's a wonderful marriage, 2 museums for the low price of one.
Cool. We don't want to keep people here for, don't want to take up too much of your time, David, but if people are watching the show and have a brain. They're probably thinking, man, how do I get here? So is there a website or a Facebook page that people could go to find out some more of the logistics, hours, things of that nature?
Thank you for that question. And again, if you're heading into Cedar Point, there's signs on every roadway showing you how to get to downtown Sandusky. And we are located in the heart of downtown Sandusky at 301 Jackson Street. And downtown Sandusky, you mentioned the coffee shop. We have several just phenomenal coffee shops, several wonderful lunch places. We have some great bars, and it's all walkable. There's a pedicab that will give you a ride around downtown, and it's on the waterfront, so some great views of the waterfront. But our website is SanduskyCedarPointMuseum.org. SanduskyCedarPointMuseum.org. And we would encourage you to visit, and it gives you our operating hours, and we'd love to see everybody. And sign our visitor's log so we know where you're from. And in all likelihood, I'll be there. So I just enjoy meeting the people and hearing the Cedar Point stories and how many of them met their spouses there and their favorite ride. And so it's really good.
Cool.
And
David, thanks for coming on.
On Facebook, we are also the just downtown Sandusky Cedar Point Historical Museum on Facebook.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, David, thanks for coming on. We appreciate you taking some time out today and adjusting to my schedule today. I appreciate that. But thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. And see you all at the museum soon.
Sweet. That was so cool. I mean, seriously, I said it during the interview, but like that man was excited to be talking about the stuff that he loves to do. And it's contagious. It really is. And that's one of the great things about parks is we're all excited and making each other more excited by our excitement.
And I know that just going to the Miral Museum last summer, you can go there and literally just stare at an object for any length of time, just to think about the history of it, where it came from, where it's at right now, what people see, what people have written on it, it's just you can transport yourself from present day back into that moment when you remember seeing that object where it originally was.
Yeah,
it's really cool. It wasn't open last year when we were up there, but I'm looking forward to the next time we're going up there, whenever that may be, to make a visit to it.
Yeah.
So, Clete, I got and I thought honestly that I would be ahead of the class, get myself ready for the interview, and tried to get some research on the museum out there before David came on. And there was I believe he mentioned Ken Miller was one of his board of directors. And the dumb thing is, in me trying to prepare for this, Ken Miller has written 2 books. One I believe is out of print, and the other one called Fun at the Old Cedar Point. And so, of course, trying to get prepared for this, and I didn't realize that it wasn't really part of the museum. He was a board member, but I thought maybe that the book was part that displayed some things at the museum. So I ordered the book, and when it came, now I don't know what I did when I ordered it, but I must have put it that it had to be a signature release. I don't know why I would have done something like that. But so the book was supposed to arrive last week. And of course, Monday passed, Tuesday passed, and no book arrived. So I get on the thing with the Amazon, and hey, where's the book at? And well, they had it up, and apparently the book arrived, and it was signed for by somebody named Barb. Now, strangely though, there's no one in my house named Barb, and as best I know, there's no one on my street named Barb. So, Barb, enjoy your book. I hope you read every word of it, wherever Barb may be. Please enjoy yourself.
That is crazy.
Yeah. So I had to fly blind today. I had no idea what was going on in the book. I want to talk about a couple of things in it because I saw excerpts from it from the preview on Amazon, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in there if you're a history person with Cedar Point or visited there. A lot of cool things, but of course, wasn't to be this time.
That's all right.
So, Clete, I also I have an update on the my saga of Did they contact? We're going to get some intro music for this.
I was going to ask you, have they responded?
They have, let's see, 2 people reached out to. No, they haven't. So no response.
Right. So, you'll need to keep us.
We need some intro music for it.
Yeah.
So Clete, another good interview today. Loved having David on. Love to have him back on sometime, and maybe go up to Cedar Point sometime. Do a little remote from there, or one of those little short videos to make a tour around there. But cool. Next week, got another interview. We have a guy named Chuck Mingo coming on. He is executive director of an organization called Undivided, and he's also a teaching pastor at Crossroads Church here in Cincinnati. And looking forward to having him on. And with that, we got anything else, Clete?
I don't know. We probably do. Something probably just broke news-wise, but
well,
too late for that now. So
it's going to happen tomorrow morning right after you hit upload.
Yeah, probably. That's all right. That's all right. We'll get up. We just need to get over it. Maybe we're just soft. Maybe that's what it is. We just need to lock in.
I'm going to put a couple dollars on SeaWorld to come forward, or United Parks, to make some large announcement. That's my bet.
All right. There you go. Well, we'll see you back here next week. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share. Check out the link to the website of the downtown Sandusky Cedar Point Historical Museum down in the description below. And share this video. That's the most important one. Sharing is caring.
Absolutely.
See you back here next